Ooh, here's some crazy sick shit. And when I say sick, I mean I don't feel so well. That kind of sick. It happened when I was in Cameroon, and I was still 22 years old. I had been living alone for about 2 months. I had a house, a great big house, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, other rooms I didn't know what they were for, a servant's quarter, great big yard in the back, great big yard in the front, a house bigger than I'll ever need in my life. Huge, cavernous. Why they put me there, I'll never know. Anyway, I was doing my laundry. I hand wash. I never hand wash clothes before. It's very difficult. Makes your hands tired. And I'm not very good at it, as I discovered. I was doing my wash in the bathtub. So I was doing my socks, my underwear, and some t-shirts. I put them in the bathtub, filled the tub up with water, put some detergent in it, shook up the water a little bit, and I went on to do something else. But I figured I'd let them soak for a little bit and come back to it. Suddenly, I didn't feel so well. I felt like I had a little fever. I didn't check my temperature. I just didn't feel well. I laid down. I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and I went to school. I felt fine. I went to go teach. During work, I suddenly felt a little ill, but not so bad, just a little like I had a fever or something. I didn't think much of it. I went home and I did a couple of things, and I went to sleep. Woke up the next morning feeling fine, but a little tired because I had been sick. But I went to work. And when I was at work, it hit me. A great, horrible fever just hit me all at once. My whole body ached. I had a headache, and it was horrible. And no symptoms other than aches, fever, and headache, body ache, and fever. And I was not good. I began to get dizzy, and my students were worried about me, and they told me I needed to go home. So I went home. One of the students said that he thinks I had malaria. And I knew about malaria, and I knew the symptoms. I was beginning to think maybe I did have malaria because I was sick, better, now really sick. And that's how it's supposed to go. So I informed the school principal that I was going home and that I may not be back the next day. So he was aware of my situation. So I went home and I went to sleep. I checked my temperature. I was about 101 degrees. I went to sleep. Woke up the next morning. I felt a little better. I felt fine. But I knew the fever was going to come back. So I went up to there was one office, like one Peace Corps house, volunteer house that you can go to, where they had you can take blood tests. So I went and took a blood test. And they had sent it off to a laboratory to be tested for malaria. And I started taking the anti-malaria medicine, which was chloroquine. Normally you take chloroquine every day to keep the malaria away. But when you get malaria, because it's no guarantee it'll keep malaria away. When you get malaria, you're supposed to just take a lot of these at once. I think 10, 20 of them at once. And it's supposed to overdose the bug that causes malaria. Malaria goes in and attacks the red blood cells. It eats the red blood cells, which makes you really sick. But then there's nothing for them to eat, and the red blood cells come back, so you feel better. And then they eat the red blood cells, and they explode, and makes you feel worse. So basically, you run out of red blood cells. That's what kills you in the end. So basically, this medicine kills those bugs that destroy your red blood cells. So I just started taking them. The thing is with this medicine, it's kind of a hallucinogenic, and it gives you lucid dreams. So I went back home, and I started reading a book. The book was Cider House Rules by John Irving. It's a book about a man who runs an orphanage, I think in New Hampshire, somewhere in New England. I think in the 1920s or 30s. He secretly does abortions. And the story is about one boy who is an orphan there for most of his life, and he secretly knows that the doctor is doing abortions. And the doctor is also a drug addict. Very interesting story. The only reason I tell you this is because I was reading this book, and it really impacted me. I was adopted from my birth. I often wonder about abortions and adoptions and things like this. And I'm reading this book, and I'm hallucinating, or I'm having these lucid dreams, and I have this horrible fever, and I'm reading this book, and I'm imagining I'm the character, and it really impacted me. as I was reading this, and I really felt like I was the main character in this book, and I was really living the book. Well, anyway, I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and my body is just absolutely aching. My fever eventually reached 106 degrees after several cycles of up and down, never fully going down, but going up, and finally, eventually it peaked around 106 degrees, and it began to go down. And I got better. I was in a weakened state for a few days, but I recovered. And the absolute aches and pains of this fever, it was just unimaginable. Not my whole body. I never felt my whole body hurt. It was unbelievable. But I got better. Anyway, the outcome was I felt stronger. I felt really healthy. I felt so alive. I really never felt so alive in my life. But anyway, my views on abortion and adoption really were impacted on this for the rest of my life. Not that it's so relevant for this video, but anyone who knows anything about me or watches other videos would understand that my views were really affected from this time in my life. That was one outcome. Again, it was just surreal reading this book. That's all I can say. Something I remember. When I had malaria, I was reading this book. The second outcome was I didn't have malaria. The blood test came back and it said, no, not malaria, but there was no name for the disease. So I don't know what the disease was. It sure acted like malaria. The medicine worked for the malaria, but it wasn't malaria. What it was, I don't know. Strangely enough, though, that's not the only time I had a tropical disease that there was no name for. Strangely. Crazy shit, right?